It is Locked On Jazz for the 4th of April. The collapses are brutal. They make you just want to cry. I have a slightly different thought and approach after the Warriors game. And it ties back to the Clippers game. And then we got to deal with the collapses. It's all coming up on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, how are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen every single weekday. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can hit that little button and hit subscribe, then hit the bell, and it'll notify you anytime we put out an episode or go live. And just follow on all your podcast providers. It's greatly appreciated. The collapse of the Utah Jazz yet again, and this time in even a more glorious fashion than we've ever seen, on the wrong side of an 18-0 run, is the lasting taste that you have to what happened over the weekend with the Jazz. The one thing that I'm going to come at with a really different perspective and understanding as I bring this to you, that in some way it is flawed because the game is built about 48 minutes and leaving the end of the game with more points than your opponent, and we've been unable to do that. I actually left the Warriors game, and you could actually hear it on POSTCAST, with a little bit of kind of a funky feeling. And that was that the first 41 minutes that we saw on Saturday were far and away the best basketball, particularly the first half, that we've seen out of the Utah Jazz in a long, long time. It was the first time, if I'm being completely straightforward, that I had watched this team play and thought to myself that they could win a playoff series in a long time. If you look at our schedule for a minute, just to understand where I'm coming from, our recent wins are against a hapless Lakers team without Anthony Davis. We beat a Knicks team. It's not good. We beat a Clipper team that was without Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, hammered them. We looked pretty good that night. We beat a Bulls team that, you know what, they're a playoff team. We should take those. They had, Levine, and that was a good win. Let's just, we can't discredit every win. Sacramento, Portland, Oklahoma City, Houston were the previous wins. The 118-114 win at Phoenix is probably one of the better performances we've seen all year long by the Jazz. That was a pretty strong one. Donovan had 26. There was good balance. Jordan had 22. We played very, very well, and they had Ayton, Booker, and Bridges. They just didn't have Chris Paul. So that one, okay, we'll look at that, highlight that February 27th, we win that game. You're like, okay, that's pretty good. And the Dallas win coming right out of the break, the 114-109 win right out of the break against a Dallas team that was pretty straight up, and we won it 114-109, kind of answered it down. Those two were the best performances I've seen from the team all year. That was in the beginning of February and March. We had that nice little win streak in February, and everyone got healthy with a good win over the Nuggets that I think is, worth referencing, that home game win over the Nuggets on 108-104. But there have not, and that was a weird one, if you remember, because Udoka Azubuike starts, and it's just kind of a funky time of the season. And then you go back, and frankly, when you get into January, it's a mess. And when you get into December, the other teams are a mess. And it's the Boston win in December doesn't have Jaylen Brown. And I understand that the Warriors don't have Steph Curry, but I thought the Jazz were great. In fact, as I'm saying, I thought it was the best. They're healthy again. They were together. The lineups were working. The ball was popping. I really thought they were about as good as I've seen them all season long. You don't go up 20 that quickly in an NBA game very often, right? A single digit or double digit first half lead. I think this, I'm finding this stat everyone's using about 14 double digit losses somewhat laughable. There's a lot of game left to be played. Fourth quarter double digit leads being lost is a problem. We're doing that. Second half double digit leads, somewhat of a problem, and we're doing that. Don't dismiss anything I'm saying here. Is not saying ignoring that there is a significant issue that you're supposed to be ahead of the game at the end. But really, we went up 48-28. We were up 20 in a span of 18 minutes of basketball against Golden State. You don't do that against a good team. That was as good a basketball as I've seen the Jazz play all year. And the collapses are brutal. But what I'm trying to say is, to some extent, to me, it's almost more important that they showed me over depending your point of view, either a 18 or a 24 or a 36-minute period of time, that they were capable of playing at that level. Because I wasn't entirely sure that they could do that. The defensive rating was a 91. At halftime, I think it was 100. The offensive rating was a 150, which is not sustainable. But we weren't actually doing anything crazy. It was kind of back to that feeling we had a year ago where, we were shooting 53% from the floor, which was a little crazy. We had 19 three attempts on 34 attempts because the Warriors won't let you shoot at the rim. We had made 9 of them, which is a little crazy. We had grabbed 4 offensive rebounds to give us extra opportunities. We had 11 assists on 18 field goals. We were exceptional, or they were exceptional, because certainly I don't want to be weak because I don't have to take credit for the end. By halftime, it had cooled off a little bit. The Jazz were shooting 48% from the floor, 9 of 23 from 3. They missed their final 4. They ended up missing 8 straight at one point. They had 13 assists on 21 field goals. They had 6 defensive steals. Their defensive rating was 100 at the half. This was as good as this team has looked to me all year. The offensive rating was a 127 against a team that's good defensively, though they have struggled recently. Kayvon Looney doesn't look right. It's changing who they are. And our defensive rating was 100 against a team that's a pretty decent offensive team. Not great, but decent. So I was I actually kind of have that. I said this to Thurl on the bus the other, as we left, I have this weird feeling, I didn't learn anything. I was perfectly well aware that this basketball team is capable of having the wheels come off, not being able to collectively put it back together, and not being able to close a game. That actually isn't that new to me, unfortunately. I know people don't want excuses. I do think fatigue has something to do with both these games, by the way. And here's why I'm saying this. Because in both of these games against the Clippers and the Jazz, had the Jazz been able to make one shot or one play, we'd never even been talking about it. The Jazz were on the 6th game of a road trip over 4 time zones in LA, and they hadn't played in 3 days. In Golden State, the Jazz were in their 9th consecutive game in non-consecutive cities. They were in their 8th game in 8 different cities. We came home for a blink of an eye and then went back out and then collapsed late against a team that hadn't played in 2 days and only played 2 games in 6 days. You can say, oh, that's an excuse. I'm not saying it's an excuse. I am saying that I think we would have made 1 or 2 more plays in each of those games that we'd not been tired, then you end up winning. And then we're not even talking about it. So to me, hey, the collapses are bad. There's all sorts of issues. There are all sorts of things to talk about. But the fact that at halftime against the Clippers, we had a 138 offensive rating and a 109 defensive rating. And, again, it was a little nutty that night. We'd hit 10 of 18 from three. It was a little bit of a misnomer. The turnovers were down, 14 assists on 22 field goals again. It's actually there. And if I'm perfectly honest, I didn't actually know it was there this year with this team. So I leave Golden State saying, you know what? For the first time in a while, maybe the first time since Phoenix, which was a great game, maybe the first time since first game back from All-Star break Dallas, I saw a basketball team that I believe was capable of winning a playoff series, no matter who they're playing. I hadn't seen that. Now, I'm also not going to lie to you that I think that the collapse in Golden State was far worse than the collapse against the Clippers because the body language of our group was just horrific. And that's way more, that's got to be solved. At some point, maybe you just solve it because the embarrassment is so much that it has to come together. I don't know. But you can't go to a deeper nadir than where the guys are on this one. It's sad. All right. Monday edition of Locked on Jazz, always brought to you by our friends over at Murdoch Chevy, located at in Woods Cross, also located in Logan. The Chevy lineup of trucks is kind of legendary. The Colorado and the Silverado, as Chevy makes the best truck out on the market. The SUV lineup starts at the top with the Utah County assault vehicles, the Suburban and the Tahoe, and they both come. And then the rest of the SUV lineup, I'd say, is very underrated. The Trax is the smallest one. The Blazers and the Trailblazer with the Equinox in there, all there for you as well. So it is at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also in Logan. And the Murdochs are not charging any more than MSRP, which is a pretty cool deal because there's not many people that are doing that right now out there in the world. It is everyone's getting their extra $3-5 grand, and they're basically saying we're not willing to do that. We're not going to charge extra and do that to the people that we know. Today's show is also brought to you by Built Bar. 2 new flavors available today. I've got to make an order right now. Brownie batter puffs. Have not had them. Did miss a puff yesterday. Was like, oh, I don't have any puffs. And so I'm ordering my coconut marshmallow and my churro puffs today. Raspberry cheesecake is out. 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, and just 4 grams of sugar. The puffs have 140 calories, 70 grams of protein, and the coconut marshmallow has 6 grams of sugar. It is dessert, but it's a protein bar, and the marshmallow-infused protein is incredible on the puffs, and the Built Bar flavor just unequaled. A protein bar that tastes like a candy bar with just 130 calories, 2.5 fat grams, 4 net carbs, 4 grams of sugar, 6 grams of fiber, and 17 grams of protein. Use the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15 at BuiltBar.com to get 15% off. Here's where we sit in the playoff world right now. The Jazz have, I don't know how to, it's so complicated, but let's try. So the Jazz are sitting at 6 at 46-32. The Nuggets are at 47-32. They had a good win yesterday. Dallas is at 49-30, and the Warriors are at 50-24. The Warriors win one game, and they're top 4 guaranteed. So pretty guaranteed. The 6th is really now either Utah or Denver. Both Denver and Utah need to win 2 more games to not go to 7th. We have Oklahoma City and Portland. It would be really nice if we could beat Memphis or Phoenix and not go to Portland, needing that on the final night of the year. It will be interesting to see if anyone tanks to 6 after they win 2 games to try to stay away from the Phoenix Suns, who are a juggernaut. No offense to the 7-game win streak Memphis Grizzlies, who are 55-23 and probably and have the second best record in the NBA and deserve to be talked about in the same ilk, having won 9 of 10, many of them without Ja Morant. Tiebreakers. Minnesota has the tiebreaker over Denver. Utah has the tiebreaker over Minnesota. Utah has the tiebreaker over Denver if they tie. The Jazz and Dallas are tied at 2-2, but if the Jazz win the division and they end up tied, which the Jazz would virtually have to do to be able to tie Dallas, then the Jazz go ahead of Dallas. Denver has the tiebreaker over the Warriors. Dallas has the tiebreaker over the Warriors. Dallas has the tiebreaker over Denver. So we got to win 2 games and not end up in the playing game. That's really where it sits right now. I want to take some of your questions because I know there's a ton right now. On the collapse against the Warriors, it's pretty monumental to be hit by a 18-0 run, and a little stunning. This, against the Clippers, the collapse to me was the 4 offensive rebounds they gave up early in the game, followed by a total defensive failure. This one, unfortunately, is a total offensive failure. Like that's the craziest part about it. It's actually not that similar at all. The offense against the Clippers, I think, shot 5 of 10 in the final minutes and was pretty good. The offense against the Warriors on Saturday completely left the building. And, people don't really move the ball late in games. That's actually kind of a misnomer. If you watch that Milwaukee-Brooklyn game, there wasn't a lot of ball movement late. In the final 7:40 of the game the other night, we go 1 of 13 from 3 and 1 of 13 and 0 of 7 from 3. Again, on the fatigue level, I don't think Hassan Whiteside played in the second half. So Rudy suddenly ran out a massive amount of minutes in a row. And I wonder whether fatigue was a part of it. Again, it's not an excuse. It's a fact. And then you can decide whether you think it explains it. But Rudy did not check out for the final 16 and a half minutes of that game. And then was not particularly impactful defensively either. I had another thing on the positives I want to bring up, by the way. The bridge lineup the other night was terrific. In the positives of things I hadn't seen in a while, the bridge lineup of House, Hernangomez, Clarkson, Conley, and Gobert had won the game for us. We were plus 17 when the bridge lineup was on the floor. That is and when I say bridge, I mean bridging from the first quarter to the second quarter and third quarter to the fourth quarter. That's the first time we've had that in ages. To me, that's another really, again, on a night where I was like, okay, they look better. They look like they can compete in playoff series. They look like they had 240 minutes of real NBA minutes. Every guy on the roster played legitimately well for most of that game. We have not had that in a long time. We've been piecing together a lineup that, to my opinion, did not have 240 minutes of NBA-level rotation minutes. Now, the game was largely dictated by when Draymond was on or off the floor, frankly. All of our runs kind of came, most of our runs came, our 16-0 run came when Draymond was off the floor. Our 12-2 run kind of came when Draymond was off the floor. He's just that good. And that's, those elite level players are the ones we can't handle. I don't know. I mean, I can go and we have another day tomorrow to do it, so maybe I will go back and run through it. I've rewatched the fourth quarter, not with the intent of charting every possession like I did last time. Quinn tried a bunch of different things in there. We didn't try a lot of different things defensively, frankly, but we did try a lot of different things offensively. We went away from Donovan. We ran some possessions to Mike. We ran a possession to Boyan. I mean, Donovan, for whatever reason, and I kind of believe, again, I'm not trying to be Pollyanna optimistic. These are consistent with my beliefs that you've heard from me before. So clutch play is a very small sample size of a very small amount of time that has huge variability. And Donovan's never been brilliant in the clutch, but he's never been awful, right? So if you look at Donovan's clutch numbers, Last year, he was 37% and 25% from three, which is not great, but it's not terrible for the league. The year before, he was 42% and 33% from three. And the 18-19 season, he was 35% and 28% from three. So if we take his last 3 years of clutch time, and I don't know if you want to look at it as clutch minutes or clutch games or what it is, but if we total those up, the numbers were all about the exact same, right? 35 and 28 is kind of the average. Again, it's not. It was 41 and 32 one year. It's not. It's not the greatest, but frankly, most guys aren't. If you look at clutch numbers, they're not that great. So if we look at his combined clutch numbers over the last 2 years, that's where he comes down. That is over the course of, depending which way you want to look at it, either minutes played or games played. That's over the course of about 91 games and, give or take 240 clutch minutes. Okay? I believe in that sample size a lot more than the really funky and not good number that we suddenly have going on with Don since December 1st, or since February 1st. So since February 1st, Donovan's clutch numbers are 10 of 40 from the floor and 2 of 17 from three. That's 25% and 12%. And then he's also 44% from the line in that time period. He has 6 turnovers and 9 assists. It's bad. But that's 11 games and 48 minutes. I find myself leaning toward the 91 game sample size and the 240 minutes for what I believe he is. And so that he comes out of this at some point. Like, this is not like Donovan didn't suddenly become this. The one I'm a little more concerned with on Don, frankly, is just the poor fourth quarters since the All-Star break. And wondering whether he's worn down. I can't imagine you're out of shape as an NBA athlete. But like when I look at Don's fourth quarter numbers since March and since the All-Star break is similar, he's in the first quarters, he shoots 50%, hits 42% of his threes. In the fourth quarter, he shoots 34% and 17% of his threes. Same player. Like, that's stunning. But again, like, I'll go sample size there. So I'm a bit flustered on I really do like. Actually, two Bluebirds just pointed out my other one. I didn't do a very good job on all my things. Like Mike Conley, who has not been very good recently, was terrific the other night. And I talked to Mike on the trip and just kind of said to him, "Hey, your rim numbers and your non-restricted, your paint numbers are way up and spike. What's going on?" He's like, "I finally feel good again." I was like, "Oh, All-Star break didn't really help you out." No, he's like, "Hey, All-Star break was great, but I was so worn down for that January that my body just wasn't right. I just been fighting it and I feel good again." Like, that's terrific. And then there's the collapse. And the collapse is mammoth. This is a weird show for me because honestly, what I really feel are all the first things. It's not new news that this team collapses down the stretch. It's not. It started in the bubble. It hasn't stopped. That's not new news to me. The new news was we played well enough to actually look like we could win a playoff series. So I'm kind of optimistic about that. Had we won or made one or two plays against the Warriors, would it actually change how we felt about down the stretch? Maybe not. Maybe the fact of the matter is that we had such horrific body language, such tremendously selfish offensive play, and such a poor approach to that final 7 minutes and 40 seconds. It's good that they got exposed again. Because honestly, that was far worse than the Clipper game. The Clipper game, we just couldn't get stops. The offense was actually fine. Don made a bunch of really good plays. Clarkson misses a good take three. The Warrior game was just a mess. Pressing, freaking out, openly not taking shots, openly sulking when the play wasn't called. the way you want it, openly not being involved in a play, openly not going for the ball. That was a mess. So it's really an incredible contrast of what some of the best times and the worst times, whatever that is. All right. How listening to the podcast Hidden Brain made me think about the Utah Jazz and your questions as we continue on today's edition of Locked On Jazz, as the Jazz will get the day off as its national championship game. Today's show is brought to you by betonline.net. Can you believe that the Lakers and the Brooklyn Nets were the odds-on favorite to start the season? And one of them is in 10th and the other's not going to make the playoffs. The Brooklyn Nets at betonline.net are still plus 700 to win the title. The second most likely team to win the title in the Eastern Conference right now. Phoenix is plus 300. The Bucks are plus 550. Brooklyn's plus 700. Celtics plus 750. Warriors plus 750. Heat plus 1,100. 76ers plus 1,100. Memphis plus 1,400. And the Jazz are plus 2,500. Dallas is plus 28 and Denver's plus 28. The thing that's interesting to me on this, like if we got out of our own echo chamber, these other teams are not that happy either. The Warriors have been a mess until that comeback, without Steph, obviously, but they have not been good. They've been bad defensively for a long time, and that's their calling card. Dallas has been kind of intermittent. Denver, Jokic is just willing them, but nobody really believes they can make a run. Phoenix and Memphis are real. Boston's amazing. Brooklyn's like barely hanging into a play-in if it wasn't for how bad the Knicks were. Like Milwaukee probably has it. Giannis has been amazing. NBA Future Awards right now at betonline.net. Marcus Smart has moved into the favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year, then Mikal Bridges, then Bam Adebayo, and then Rudy Gobert. It's a good campaign they've been running. Most Improved Player, Ja Morant. Rookie of the Year, Evan Mobley. Sixth Man of the Year, Kelly Oubre, followed by Kevin Love. It's all at betonline.net, where the game begins. How listening to the podcast Hidden Brain made me think about the Jazz. So Hidden Brain did a show on perceptions, and it was an interesting. They talked about two things. One was that if you were to say to someone, the second one's better than the first. But if you were to say to someone, what do you think the chances are of a major flood in North America that causes 1,000 people to die? And then if you were to ask someone, what are the chances of a dam breaking in Northern California because of an earthquake and a massive flood that causes 1,000 people to die? If you know anything about forecasting and numbers, the first number should be much larger. You're using all of North America. It's any flood anywhere, and it takes 1,000 people to die. It's not that. It's unlikely, but it's not crazy. The other one feels very real, because I gave you all the specifics of a dam and an earthquake in Northern California, and you saw it visually. You could actually see it visually. As I said that to you, you're like, oh, dam breaks, flood, 1,000 people die. It's far less likely. And yet, if you were to ask people that question, which of those two is most likely in separate settings, you'd get a much higher number on the Northern California thing. That's a little bit of what we are right now. We're a little bit, don't misunderstand. Yeah, I got it. I'm not trying to minimize. But we're a little bit of the Northern California dam flood breaking 1,000 people die because it's right there on us. And it feels very specific, and we're not looking out. The other one that's interesting is if you're at a wedding, they talked about this. If you're at a wedding and everyone's joyous and everyone says, gosh, what do you think the chances that they're going to make it for the next 10 years? And you're watching them and everyone's so happy and you know them and da-da-da. And your answer would be like, oh, it's like 97% they're going to make it. It's such a joyous event. Everyone's so happy. And yet the data shows that you look at the socioeconomic background, you look at what's going on there, and the chances are that the chances are 55, 60% they're going to make it. And that's actually the right number. I don't suggest going to weddings and professing this number to people at the joyous occasion when everyone's dancing around, going up to the mother of the bride and saying, gosh, you know what? There's a 60% chance they're going to make it. I would suggest not doing that. And you can forecast it. And so there's a little bit of an essence of us here where we have, rightfully so, such high expectations and want so much of this team, and we're just brokenhearted by what we're seeing. And then, like I hate to say this, like I don't want to like totally burst our bubble, but like if you go look at big forecast, like how many teams have won an NBA title or made the NBA finals without a first team or second team all NBA player? Like super forecast it. Like that's very few. I don't think we have a top 10 player in the NBA right now. Like I don't think so, right? I don't know, you know. How many teams go to the NBA finals or win a conference without a top 10 player? How many teams go to an NBA finals without, like, I guess we have Mike Conley who's a top 5 pick, but without like one of their two main guns being a top pick, top 10 pick. So my point on that is not like just drop all hope and things, but we need to remember that despite the fact we had the best record in the NBA last year and had this incredible season, and there were some unique things to last year's season, we're really trying to buck a lot of trends. You know, we're trying to be a team that didn't go through a tank, that didn't go get a top 5 pick, that doesn't, you know, if you go look at the best teams across the league right now that have a real chance to win it, you know, the Celtics have 2 top 3 picks. The Bucks actually have Giannis not as a top pick, so they bucked the trend, and they got but they have an MVP and one top 10 player in the NBA and probably 2 all-league players. Middleton's probably not all-league. Joel's a top 5 pick, right? And James Harden's a top 5 pick. Phoenix bucking the trend a little bit. Chris Paul's the number 3 pick and MVP candidate, and Devin Booker's going to be all-league. John Morant's a top 3 pick. Right? Like, remember that what we're trying to do as a group is vastly buck the trends and overwhelm the super forecasting and surprise everything. And it's an unnatural thing that's trying to happen here in Utah, and it's awfully hard. And so let's see. You know, but by the way, like for the old blow it up and go do something else, like we're still going to be trying to buck all those trends. But we can talk about that later. Why don't we talk about the mentally being up 20? We need to embarrass teams and try to get to 40 before putting it on cruise control. I don't know that we're putting it on cruise control. I just, you know, teams don't go up 40 in the NBA very often. Teams don't go up 20 very often in the NBA. All right, I have one last note here. I think this might be stupid. I think it's relatively important for some ridiculous reason. Because I think it needs to be put in perspective that I do think what we're watching is not great. Like, okay, like I'm not trying to, but I also don't think it's as like, oh my God, like, it's not great. Don't misunderstand. It's not as like totally insane. Oh my gosh, nobody's ever done this before in the history of the game type stuff. So let me give you a few numbers, and then you can decide whether you think there's any. You can decide that this whole show has no validity. I'm totally fine with that. And I think you're justified to be running around the office and just going crazy. So the Jazz, when they have a fourth quarter lead of 10 points or more this year, in the fourth quarter are 41-4 in the fourth quarter of games. Now, part of this is, again, that the Jazz have had more fourth quarter leads than anyone in the NBA. Now we're 41-5. Okay, we are 41-4 going in. So we've had 46 fourth quarter leads of double digits, which is the most of anyone in the NBA. And give Memphis credit, or excuse me, Phoenix has 49. And Phoenix is 49-0, and Memphis is 45-0, and that's what a great team does. And we have not shown that. And let's not discredit them for that. At the same time, the league average when you lead by 10 in the fourth quarter of games so far this year is 880 and 60, which wins 94% of the time, and we're winning like 89% of the time. It's not good, but it's not like we're at 52% of the time in league average. Now, we should be better than league average. The fact of the matter is we're one of the elite teams in the league until the final 7 minutes, and then we're well below league average. That's really what that says. We knew that. We've lost 12 second half double-digit leads. Somewhat this might be because we play and shoot a lot of threes. We've also had 53 second half double-digit leads. The only team that's also had 53 is Miami. We've won 77% of our games in which we have led by double digits in the second half. The league average for that, and again, we should be better than league average, is 85%. Okay, that's pretty significant, but it's really one or two, not 12, right? We like to talk about 12 like you should win every single one of them. We shouldn't have lost more than 10. Okay, so it's 2 or 3. Like I've heard the comments like, if we had won all the games we had a double-digit lead against, okay, we'd be, okay, well, Phoenix has done that. They're 51-0 when they have a double-digit lead in the second half. They're the only ones in the league that have come close to doing that. Milwaukee's 38-1. It's great credit to them. It's probably the definition from a championship team. So, you know, it's bad. It's not, we're having a tendency to exaggerate it a little bit, but it's not good. Those are real. All right, I can't decide what we're doing tomorrow. We're either digging into what happened or we're just not, because none of us can handle it anymore. Hope I made some sense today. Have a great one. See you later.